Bioware's been having some issues. Bioware's been in big trouble ever since they released that garbage trash game that is dragonage: the Veilguard. Now, I'm going to have a little bit of a nuanced take here. I'm going to get a little bit wacky and wild. The game didn't just release, or didn't just fail because it was woke. Like, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, like, obviously the hyper-political writing did not help it, right? Did not help it. But I also think that there's a huge misunderstanding of what made RPGs good in the past and what games are doing now to kind of take away from that. It has kind of moved away from, especially with a lot of like modern RPGs, has moved away from player choice and player expression to we're going to do whatever we want and force it down your throat, right? A great example of something that didn't do this, which I have a huge issue with any of the morons in the gaming sphere who called Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 woke. You're idiots. You're dumb. You're absolutely a moron. The game rewards player choice and player expression. If you want to be gay, you can be gay. Wow, what a shocker. We're getting in some real crazy grounds here where we're doing wild and wacky things. But I think if the game's narrative is built around bad dialogue, forcing you to have to deal with characters that are insufferable, and that I heard from what I've seen, Toph was an insufferable character, on top of the fact that it was just forced political messaging. When all that stuff feels like it is a necessary, hard-hitting part of the story, and there is no avoiding it in an RPG, and you really can't clap back, it feels like it's limiting expression in order to pass a message. And that's where I have a problem, because it doesn't feel like a video game anymore. It feels like a lecture. And I think that's where I will always disagree with the go woke, go broke guys, is I think the writing and the player expression is where a lot of the falters are falling, because if you just make a good game, at the end of the day, people will come and play your game. But if you try to force a game on people, they don't want to play it.
Guy Mark Dara made a video complaining about gamers. Mark Dara, an ex-dev from Bioware. And what's even more hilarious is how he's getting all upset in the comments of that video, which we're definitely going to be taking a look at. He's like rage responding to people. It's great entertainment for us. First, a little more info on Mark Dara. So yeah, once again, this guy is an ex-dev for Bioware, although apparently he was brought back to do some consulting on Veilguard, what some people are saying. If that's true, that's hilarious. What we do know, however, is that he was at the very least attempting to prop up and defend Veilguard. For example, Rock, Paper, Shotgun here as a headline. Bioware's Mark Dara thinks Veilguard's the first Dragon Age where the combat's actually fun. What I see in Veilguard is a game.
You know, I did hear that. So I know some people had problems with the combat, but because it felt almost grindy because of the fact that it feels like it was supposed to be a multiplayer game. It's kind of along the lines of what I've heard about Avowed. Now, what cut me off on Avowed wasn't the fact that it was like the dev came out and said stupid stuff. I have said a million times on this channel that there is nothing pre a game launching that will stop me from making it an opinion on that game. Now, if a game releases and I see a bunch of videos and I see a bunch of clips and it's all cringe, all garbage, I'm not going to spend my money on it. There's too many. It starts like I can ignore the canary in a coal mine because that motherfucker might just be trapped and flapping its wings, right? But if I'm looking down into the coal mine and there's literal rocks falling on people, I'm not wasting my money on it. And I feel like with Dragon Age Veilguard, there was definitely rocks falling on it, but I feel like with Avowed, what I've seen so far, and I haven't played it yet, I need to download it on my Xbox, but I really don't have room on my Xbox, and I have so many other games I gotta play. Anyways, getting back to the point at hand, the combat looks fun in that game. But one of the huge critiques I have heard is the leveling mechanic in the game almost feels like a multiplayer game, which means that each new area you feel outspec'd. You don't feel like you're ever like ahead or do that RPG moment where you're like, oh, I'm cooking everything in here. It's like you're always behind, which is more of like an MMO type tactic. It's what I had an issue with Diablo 4, and I feel like when you build a game, even if you build a game around it initially to be multiplayer and then you cut it back to single player, you have to think about how you have to make those tweaks that are very important, because even if your core combat is fun, there's going to be a vibe where halfway through the game you're going to be, oh yeah, this was a multiplayer game, and that's not something you want to be thinking about.
That finally bridges the gap. Oh, and you know what? Here's some more information on the whole Veilguard consulting thing. Games Radar had wrote, former Dragon Age boss now consulting on the Veilguard. No way. Says the RPG really is the best Dragon Age game that I've ever played. Yeah, so that's the sort of dude we're talking about.
Dude, that's just well, that's kind of like a cope. I hate when somebody who worked for a company or still slightly worked for a company is out there just glazing. Just glazing and not being like true and honest self. And I mean, maybe he actually has this opinion, but from what I've heard about the story, like the big choices you can make in Veilguard, they're not great. Yeah, I feel like from what I heard is the RPG mechanics of Dragon Age of Veilguard are absolutely atrocious, along with the art style. Because art style, it looks, I don't know what it is about everything coming out on Unreal Engine 5, but it just looks like bad Fortnite, and I'm not about that. But when you cut the RPG mechanics, people aren't playing this to play a hack and slash game. I'm sorry. People play these RPGs because they want to get into a world. They want to have meaningful choices. They want the game. They want to graft the game around themselves and their personal choices throughout the story. Now, what like joining different groups and factions, that's the same thing, but joining different factions and making your own story, that's part of what makes an RPG great. I mean, not all RPGs do the multiple different stories, multiple different endings throughout always, but usually there's a lot of big choices in between, and I feel like a lot of modern RPGs are kind of moving away from this, and I hate that.
Subtext reading. Mark Dara has high praise for BioWare's latest. And apparently this dude is a BioWare veteran. How can this dude just like tarnish BioWare's legacy like this? Oh, it's the best Dragon Age game ever. It's so great. To BioWare's credit, they did used to make good games. The frick is this guy doing? Acting like, oh, Veilguard's the best EA game. BioWare's better than ever. Dudes like this are just complete sellouts. Trying to sell out to the modern audience corpos out there and all that. Yeah, it's pathetic. So that takes us to the current news with this guy. PC Gamer making this tweet that says, BioWare veteran calls out the cruelty of fans celebrating layoffs, saying,
so here's the thing, I've never celebrated layoffs, right? I there has been times where I've came out and I've said things kind of in a regard that makes it seem like I'm like rooting for layoffs, and I'm not. I'm saying like I understand them. I can understand them. When Arcane Austin was shut down, take that for example. I understood why they were shut down. A lot of people were up in arms and so mad because they were the people that made Prey 2017, and they worked alongside Arcane Leon for all of those other Dishonored games, and then they made one of the Dishonored games themselves. And it's like, yeah, but that entire team had basically moved on to different studios. They went and worked on Weird West and a bunch of other things. I know some went to Weird West's studio. I can't remember what the studio is off the top of my head. You'll have to let me know in the comments down below. But then some others went to other places, and it was basically just a skeleton crew of what they used to have. And I think what happened, now I'm not like an analyst or anything, but using a little bit of deductive reasoning, considering they all left after Prey 2017, and the game that was then started after Prey 2017 was Redfall, was Bethesda's push into multiplayer games and forcing everything to be multiplayer. A lot of them saw the writing on the wall of, this is what the studio's gonna, or this is what they're gonna force us to do. I'm out. I don't feel like my hands are creatively tied. They forced us to name the game Prey so they could ruin our game, basically, because I don't think I would have had a difference of opinion on Prey because I'm not the biggest fan of it. I think it's good. I'm just not in love with it. I think that it does some things well and other things really, really bad. But as a game by itself, I think it's a quality game, but I think it also was hampered by the fact that it was called Prey. I think there is a lot of pushback and vitriol that game gets, undeservedly so, because it has the Prey name attached to it. And I think a lot of people took issue with that and left Arcane Austin. And when Redfall came out and it was a total clusterfuck, it was AIDS dragon asshole juice. That's not something, if I'm a big company and I know that I need to make cuts in order to keep the money where we're still making money, I'm going to be looking at a studio like Arcane Austin and say, do we need them? Are they necessary, or have they proved that they can't do it? And that was the choice the company made. Now, I can understand it. I can logisticize it in my own, I'm just making up words now, or fucking up words, in my own mind to say, I understand the steps and the choices that were made to making that. Now, something like Tango, I really don't get it. I know that Hi-Fi Rush didn't sell incredibly great, but I mean, it was a niche title. I don't understand why Tango was shut down, why their doors were closed. It makes no fucking sense to me. And a lot of these choices don't always make sense to me, but like when you release a game like Dragon Age the Veilguard, I'm bringing it back. When you release a game like Dragon Age the Veilguard and it is as absolutely terrible, where almost everyone, even people that were vehemently defending it, went into the game and had to admit that the game was just fucking mid. It was terrible. So when you have something like that, you have to look, okay, where are the choices that were made? Who were the creative people that were the heads of this? Why were these decisions made? You guys aren't bringing money to the company, so we're going to lay you off. And if you're a good enough developer, you will get another job somewhere else that will give you more freedom. And I think that's one of the reasons why the indie scene is blowing up right now, is because these overblown studios are having these issues where they're putting out bullshit shit games and just expecting everybody to suck them down. And then gaming media comes in, fucking writes 800 articles about how you're the raw problem with why this is happening. It's your fault. You should have to buy the game. You should have to support these studios. Otherwise, these people are going to lose their job. And that's a lot to put on a consumer.
You are crossing a line, and you're probably attacking the wrong person anyway. The source for this quote is, as mentioned, a video he made, which is on his channel, and we're going to take a look at a portion of that video. I've already watched the full thing twice myself, and I'm just going to summarize the great majority of the video, which is simply that the middle part of the video, he's essentially just making excuses for bad game devs. And the latter part of the video, he's essentially trying to dictate who gamers are allowed to criticize and who they're not allowed to criticize. There's also a prevalent recurring theme in his video, which is he doesn't actually use the word criticize. He doesn't want to admit that gamers have fair critiques for these corporations and these devs. No, instead he phrases it specifically as gamers attacking and complaining. And I don't think that's coincidence. I think there's one of two things going on here. Either he's intentionally phrasing it that way, or he's subconsciously phrasing it that way. Either thing leading to the conclusion that he clearly doesn't think gamers are really valid to criticize these corpos, and he's just trying to play cover for them. But yeah, that's not going well because gamers are seeing right through his nonsense and calling him out, which, as mentioned, he's getting upset about in his own comment section. All that said, now I'm going to play a portion of his video for you because
Be aware that this is him reiterating what was said in this video. This is not the guy himself saying it, so you got to take everything he's saying with a grain of salt. I'm not just gonna believe everything he says at face value, because I think that's a thing that a lot of people do. But let's say for sake of argument that he is. And I mean, this is the problem I have seen other game outlets do. I've seen developers do, where they put all the fault on the consumer, on gamers. They make blanket terms. They fault things like culture war and all this other stuff, when in reality, if your game ends up not being BS, people will call those weird grifter people out. I mean, I was vehemently right there, standing there, making fun of Andy Pants Gaming when he did the Indiana Jones thing. I did not like that he was calling Indiana Jones going to be woke before the game even released. I thought it was stupid. I thought it was cringe. I thought there was no basis for it. There was nothing we had seen other than one dev looked kind of cringy. We're going to make decisions off of that one dev? No. And I think that there is an issue, though, where after a game releases and then they get pushed back, they lump everyone into, oh, well, it's just these woke grifter grums type guys. It's just these alt-right guys. And that's such a disingenuous. And it's always like, oh, gamers are the problem. No, dude, that's your fucking... Those are the people you're selling to. You need to realize that. You can villainize them all day long, but all that's going to do is ruin your bottom line, and your game's going to flop. You have to realize that these are the people that are buying your shit. That's why the Bud Light thing works so well. Now, the whole Bud Light thing to me was incredibly cringe, but it worked because who the fuck's buying Bud Light, right? It's not your posh, it's not your poshy fucking leftist guy, right? I don't know if I know a lot of people that are on the left, a lot of people on the right, and I can tell you right now, the people that are drinking your fucking IPAs and shit, those are gonna be your left-wing guys, right? I don't know why they fucking like their IPAs, dude, and there's nothing for that, but they're more about that handcrafted care type shit. Your right-wing guy just wants to fucking drink a beer and go fish, right? Now, the other guys like fishing too, but it's not, I'm not trying to generalize people, just in my experience, right? So when you look at like the entirety of your buying base and you say you're the problem, you're the issue, they're gonna get pissed. They're not gonna buy your shit, and then you're going to lose employees. You're going to lose funding. You're not gonna be able to afford a lot of this shit, and it's just plain and common sense to me.
While I could summarize this part too, it's just especially amusing what he says here, so enjoy.
Did you read the title? Did it say something like your $70 doesn't buy you cruelty? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. The fact that you bought a game that you didn't like doesn't give you the right to be cruel or unkind to the people that developed that game. Now I'm going to be...
And I want to be real. If I'm going to be charitable to this guy, I want you to know, if you buy something, right? If you buy something and you see somebody on Twitter who worked on the game, that doesn't mean go fucking make fun of them and be a dick to them. I see this all the time, this vitriol used to, I'm going to get this guy, I'm going to get this guy. And I see it even with people, person to person. And that's kind of why I don't, some people might say I ride the fence or whatever. I don't really give a shit what you think about me. I'm just giving you my perspective, but I don't think you should harass anybody. If they're out there making actual like gross statements, right? If they're saying this group of people is disgusting and foul and lesser, and I don't want you to buy our game, highlighting that, screenshotting that, and highlighting that as an example of why your game failed is one thing, but utilizing it to start a hate campaign against that person, I think is never okay. I don't like hate campaigns against people. I think I do think when you're utilizing your social media and utilizing the fact that you work for a company and advertising your game, but also making statements that are kind of vitriolic toward a big portion of your buying audience, you're not asking for it, but you're kind of welcoming it in. I know this because I'm a creator on YouTube, right? I'm a Jizz Falcon that sucks up all the drama, sucks up all the tea, baby. And I know that one day that people are going to clip me up, throw me on the internet, and I just have to deal with that. I gotta roll with the punches. That's just how things are. And when you buy a game, you have every right to say anything you want to say about that. I want that to be known. I wanted to cover the fact that you shouldn't harass people, but also you should have every freedom to say everything you want about the game. Be as angry about that game as you want. It is your money. They sold you a product. Now you can give your opinion on the product, whether they like that opinion or not. If you can be as vile as you want about saying how fucking terrible that product is, because it's your money, it's your opinion, and they can't take that from you. No one can take that from you.
Clear about something. I'm not saying that you have to like the thing you bought. I'm not saying even that you aren't allowed to complain about the thing you bought. You can have whatever opinion that you feel like towards a game.
Great.
Even if that opinion is stupid and wrong, you are entitled to that opinion. And to some degree...
I mean, this is a thing where I disagree with a lot of people where they say that you can have a wrong opinion. I mean, it was a long time before I could make the thing where somebody's like, no one can have a wrong opinion. And I think there is an extent where that is true. Like, oh, well, I think grass is green. Well, that's just factually incorrect. Well, it's my opinion that the grass is blue. I mean, that's what it's my opinion that grass is blue. Obviously, that is 100% false. And if you're making up absolute bullshit about a game and saying it can't do this, or being disingenuous to the fact that it definitely is fine, and you don't like it because console wars or some shit. Yeah, there can be wrong opinions, but for the most part, a lot of times now is they like to lump in everything that's like a big discontent, where it's like, well, we don't have any problem with like a character being whatever. We don't care if a character's anything. It's just write them well. And if I don't want to deal with that character, don't force that character on me. And that can be considered a wrong opinion. And I don't think that it should be up to a developer to tell me that when we're buying their product. For me, that's just going to show me that I won't buy their products again. It's along the lines of Assassin's Creed, whatever the Japanese Assassin's Creed is. I didn't give a shit about that game when it was announced because I'm done with Ubisoft. After what they did to Tom Clancy as an IP, after Tom Clancy died, they basically walked over to his grave, had an entire circle jerk on his grave, and said, "We're gonna do whatever the fuck we want with your name." And I've had a problem with Ubisoft games ever since. They disrespect Tom Clancy at a level that no writer should be disrespected. I think it's egregious, and I think it's disgusting. It started with Rainbow Six Siege. Now, you might like Rainbow Six Siege, say it's it's really tactical, and tactical is Tom Clancy. Well, you also have to remember Tom Clancy was a storyteller, and where's the story in Rainbow Six Siege? The fact that that game never had a campaign will be, to me, is a critique on the fact that they're utilizing Tom Clancy's name. They could have just called it Siege, because when the game released, they didn't have characters from the other Tom Clancy games. It just had all these generic fucking SWAT guys. So I think that I didn't care about whatever that Assassin's Creed Japan game is, because I feel like Ubisoft has proved time and time again they do not give a shit what you think, and they're going to continue it not giving a shit what you think. And I think the reason why they did the game the way they did was, one, to get brownie points from a certain group, and to rile up the other group to get free publicity for the game. I think they're playing you idiots like goddamn monkeys, knowing that one side will be yelling and screeching and raying, the other side will be snapping and yes queening, and you guys will be arguing over nothing. Fucking nothing. Because then you're going to buy a worse version of a game that already exists, which is whatever the fucking PlayStation version is. What is that game called? I don't know. You have to let me know in the comments. I drew a blank. But whatever that Ghost of Tsushima. You're getting a fucking worse version of Ghost of Tsushima is what you're going to get with Assassin's Creed fucking Japan.
You're entitled to express that opinion to the corporation, to the video game studio that created this game that you bought. You paid $70 of your own dollars for this game, and it disappointed you, and you're angry about that. That is fine. You are entitled to be angry about it, and you're entitled to express that anger in certain channels. If you are mad at that Ubisoft game, be mad at Ubisoft. Express your anger to Ubisoft or to the studio that made the game. But you cross a line when you start being cruel about it. So why am I saying you don't get to be cruel because you spent $70? Let's walk through it. One, you shouldn't be cruel at all. What are you doing? It's a video game. You don't need to go out of your way to cause harm to other people because of a video game that you don't like.
Okay, so
now here's the thing. I do agree with almost every single statement he made there. I actually agree. I don't have any real gripes. Now, I think what has been considered cruelty in the modern era has been stretched a lot to just kind of an all-encompassing, like, blanket term to be like, oh, well, he's being mean because I made the game and they saw me say something political, so they're blasting me on the internet, and that's being cruel. Or it's a hate campaign, or I'm only getting this because of this group. And I think that's a different definition of cruel. But in the general sense, I don't think you should be going after, like, hunting down every single dev and blowing up their social medias, trying to tell them how shitty the game is. I think that you can have a discourse, you can have an understanding, you can talk about the product, say this is bad, this is cringe. Do you see this dialogue? This is fucking bullshit. I don't care if you're non-binary or whatever. You're a dick to every single other party member in the crew. Toph was just a dick to everybody. Toph was an insufferable character. But you look at, like, all the other factors, right? And you can have these criticisms, you can have these critiques, but hunting down every dev, and then that's just some spurg behavior. I mean, that's the same thing whenever I cover Hassan Piker. I get people that go into my Discord that then make it like kind of an unfun place for my community, and I don't like when people do that, and I don't like the idea of people going out of their way to be vitriolic and to, oh, well, I'm gonna one up the other guy, and you see it on both sides continuously and insufferably. And I think that there needs to be an understanding of, like, in like all of this thing that rag on the game as much as you want, talk or like blast it as much as you want, but hunting down all the devs and then talking shit about them, it's kind of cringe. It's kind of cringe unless they're doing something to provoke it. If they're out there calling everybody homophobic or something because they didn't like Toph, or Toe, whatever fucking their fucking name is. If they're out there calling throwing attacks, it's like, well, yeah, it's okay to say something back to, but don't be out there be like, oh, you fucking bitch, you whore. Because again, if you're doing this shit and it's all over like Twitter or whatever, like even if you think that you're joking, it's not going to come across great. Now you're free to do whatever the fuck you want. I'm just saying my personal views on it, because freedom of speech does exist. You can be a dickhead as much as you want. There is nothing I can do to stop you or anybody else, and I'm not going to advocate for you to stop. I'm just saying I think that the more rational thing to do is to have an actual conversation about it. Say, hey, this is what's going on. I would suggest maybe not buying any EA games for a while or any Bioware games for a while if these are the people they hire. And after a while of them not selling games, they'll get the point. They'll get the point if people just don't buy their slop, because eventually they will get fired, somebody else will take the reins, and the world will heal itself.
Oh, yeah, cruel. He goes off about being cruel and never really defines what he means by cruel. Chances are that's something he would use to fit his own meaning whenever it's convenient for him to defend corpos. And okay, here's a question, bruh. Why do these giant corporations get to be cruel to gamers? Trying to take our money, charge us $70 for their AAA slop, oftentimes promising features that are not even there, and releasing games that are far too buggy than they should be at release. Sometimes essentially using players as their own beta testers without properly disclosing that that's even what they're doing. It's an extremely shady and corrupt industry. You don't see this guy advocating for gamers to get refunds on these slop games. Nah, instead he's just trying to dictate how gamers are allowed to respond when these corporations try and swindle people out of their money. And of course I understand that they're not literally forcing someone to buy their game. They don't threaten them to buy the game or else. But as mentioned, a lot of the time these corporations are very dishonest in how
I do feel like this is kind of a disingenuous argument. We'll go back to this one time, but I just feel like he's adding a lot, and that's kind of what you do. This isn't against the YouTuber. I just feel, one, I don't like when people, I do agree with defending the corporation, but I just feel like he's pulling the argument in another direction to fit his narrative
on these slop games. Nah, instead he's just trying to dictate how gamers are allowed to respond when these corporations try and swindle people out of their money. And of course I understand that they're not literally forcing someone to buy their game. They don't threaten them to corpos. And okay, here's a question, bruh. Why do these giant corporations get to be cruel to gamers? Trying to take our money, charge us $70 for their AAA slop, oftentimes promising features that are not even there, and releasing games that are far too buggy than they should be at release. Sometimes essentially using players as their own beta testers without properly disclosing that that's even what they're doing. It's an extremely shady and corrupt industry. You don't see this guy advocating for gamers to get refunds on these slop games. Dishonest.
So here's the argument kind of lands, and I understand where he's coming from. Again, I think that does go to an idea that it's like, why are we getting charged $70 for a game? Well, once the industry standards set in, that it was like, oh well, we got these games, it's quality, we are jumping the price up to $70, but look at what the graphics are doing, look what the gameplay is doing, look what all this other stuff's doing. And then the rest of the industry took notice that, oh, we're allowed to charge $70 now. So all of these games that were half-baked, scrapped it and redrafted and are way blown out past their budgets should have been. Now they're trying to flip the mistakes over onto the gamer and try to make up whatever costs they can. And I do think that's very disingenuous, but that doesn't mean you can go out of your way and harass people. Now, again, I don't know if he was talking about harassment or just your what criticism he deems acceptable, because I mean, I've seen people like David Jaffe, he's an developer, he made God of War, and he likes to try to put in a box what you're allowed to criticize about a game. Well, you can't criticize it because of forced LGBT stuff. Well, you can criticize it for bad dialogue, but you can't criticize it for forced political messaging. And it's like, well, no, I can criticize it however the fuck I want. I think by being vague, he covered his ass there, and all of this argument's going to make you look bad now, because there's there's really, without me having seen his video, which I haven't seen the full thing. I'm just reacting to this. I can't make an actual description of what he meant there, but I do think that the industry does need to take note and realize that if you have a game that you're just trying to piece together with semen and fucking tears, you shouldn't be able to charge $70 for it. And I think we need to hold these studios accountable for that, because that is a huge issue. We've had 2 games in the last year and a half, Avowed and Dragon Age: The Veilguard. Now I hear Avowed's much better, but the idea that they were these multiplayer games that were kind of scrapped and then re-shoved together with fucking like menstruating juices and tampons to be shoved out the door. It's going to come off, and we're going to see it as gamers. We're going to see that you're selling us a fucking pieced-together bullshit product, even if it runs smoothly. It's going to feel fucking weird.
How they're presenting their game as if it's a complete product, when a lot of the time these AAA games really aren't.
If you feel like you need to focus it down onto an actual human being, I mean, that's really sad. I'm sorry. That's very sad, and hopefully you can grow beyond that. But I will give you a couple of outlets. If you need to complain at a human being, I'm going to say you don't get to go lower than the first person in the credits.
Yes, the complaining police over here. Oh, you don't get to do this. You can only do that.
Yeah, I don't like the idea that you can tell somebody who they can't criticize. I mean, if an art the thing that happened with Avowed was an art director, the art director or the creative lead for one or something like that came out and was just vitriolic and wanted to get Elon Musk on the radar to piss off Elon Musk and Grums. If that person is doing this thing, he's not going to be the first name, or she isn't going to be the first name on the credits, and so you can't criticize them. It's one of those things, like, you can't tell. You think like making this, it's like how I would have phrased that would have been, I personally don't like when people like attack everybody who worked on the game. If you have problems and you see one of the employees who are out there wilding out like a motherfucker, talk at the main developer, then complain at the main developer, the game director. Complain at him, and maybe then something will happen. I think that would have been a better way to word that argument. But just to tell people what they can and can't do is always going to put people on the defensive. It's always going to make people be back here with the whole fighting stance, bro. They're fucking knuckling and cluckling, and they don't want to fuck around.
And an important thing to take note of is how he's not providing any examples. Like, what is he even specifically talking about here? I don't generally see gamers going after like specific people who worked on a game unless those people went out of their way to attack gamers first. For example, we have seen devs at certain...
And I would agree. I did say this. I would 100% agree that a lot of times it boils down to developers are out there fucking wilding and being fucking dickheads, and then wondering why they're getting attacked. They're getting attacked. Well, violence begets violence almost always. So if you're out there being a douchebag, you're going to get douchebag behavior back.
Companies, certain devs, literally making inflammatory statements that target gamers with hostility, in which case, obviously, yeah, the gamers that see that may very well respond to it, and they're allowed to do that. Or in other circumstances, when we've seen devs, for example, some of the Veilguard devs, who very obviously put in, like, self-insert slop into the game, which we also directly see negatively impacted the game. Yeah, people are allowed to criticize those choices and the people who made them. Just because you're a game dev doesn't mean you're free from criticism, and oh, you can't criticize me. You can only criticize the first name in the credits.
Be a human being, have some empathy, and stop being cruel. Stop throwing a party because a bunch of people lost their jobs. Because you don't know the circumstances that resulted in the thing that you're mad at. People deserve...
Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious when you have a game that that took as long in development as Dragon Age: The Veilguard, and then it fucking clusterfuck blows its load and does nothing. It just blows its load and it lands right on the floor. It's not creating any babies. It's not creating dividends. So what is EA going to do? EA is going to look at this game that was massively over budgeted, that's been through a bunch of reworks, and they're like, fuck, well, look at this. Look at we fiddly fucked, and we need to downsize. That's what's gonna happen. And when you have a bunch of oversized studios that that are producing games below a quality standard that sells, that's what happens. I mean, do I think that you should be out there celebrating it? No. But again, me even saying this, he might be considered celebrating it when I'm just making logical conclusions.
Some grace, people deserve some empathy from you, and if you can't provide that, then stay off the internet completely.
Yeah, the lack of self-awareness with this guy, man, is pretty astonishing. Telling us to stay off the internet, that's what he should be doing, really. Like, he's just making terrible points and making himself look like a fool. And again, like I mentioned multiple times, it only gets worse in his own comment section. We're almost there, by the way. And there's 2 more points I'll bring up really quick. It shouldn't be surprising when people celebrate some of these companies going through layoffs after these companies have been very predatory towards gamers, and or they have people working at those companies that have made public statements showing hostility to gamers. Quite literally, you can argue that with these companies going through layoffs, the industry is actually healing. The final point is that it comes off really hollow when he's pretending to care about people that get laid off. He's unwilling to criticize the devs who are factually bringing these studios down, which very well may result in a game underperforming and then everyone getting laid off. And I'm using everyone a bit facetiously here, but you know, a massive number of people.
And I've said this in the past, I actually want to piggyback off that I know I paused a lot and I've rambled a lot in this breakdown, but there's something that I think does need to be said, and I think every studio out there needs to have a conversation with the people that work there. If you're, let's say I was making a game, right? I was making a game, and I decided that to hire somebody on, and that person went on and said, I don't know, fucking Nancy Pelosi is a dirty whore, or fucking Donald Trump is a fucking dirty whore, right? I would instantly go to that person and say, the fuck did you do that? Why the fuck did you do that? Delete it, apologize. Now, you might be saying, well, that seems pretty cruel. It's their own personal thing. Well, if they have my fucking game studio in their bio and they talk about my game constantly, I do not want them putting half of my buying base on blast. Whether it's the left or the right, I don't want them being put on blast, because at the end of the day, those are the people that are going to give me money. And I want to put in, like, if it's just an FPS game where I'm like, or a single player, very narrative single story, and this is the story, cool. Like, that's fine. I think that you can make whatever game you want, say that this is what the game's going to be unapologetic about it, say this is what it's going to be, but don't be vitriolic about it. Say this game's going to be centered around LGBT, right? I mean, it's like if you go to buy a Postal game, you're not going to tell them that, oh, well, this game's offensive. Well, no shit. It's just not for you. And some games aren't for you. They're not made to be for everyone, not every game. But when you have these massive RPGs that the studios dump tons and tons and tons of money on, and that it's supposed to be the next big thing, they're trying to market that to everyone. Otherwise, they wouldn't have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on it.
He really didn't want layoffs to happen, then he shouldn't be upset when gamers find people responsible for dragging these games down and then criticizing the bad work that they do. That bad work can directly lead to the game underperforming and then, surprise, layoffs. But nah, instead he's ardently defending these people for some reason. Anyways, let me know what you think about that stuff. Now on to the comments. A top comment reads, "A simple bill of $70 gives me the right to critique a product." And Mark responds with this really weird comment that says, "Watch the video, dislike something, express that dislike to the studio, but why are you crawling into someone's personal social media feed? If you need a human, look at the first few names in the credits."
I mean, again, I think that he is valid with at face value. At face value, that is a good argument. If you go a little bit deeper and see some of the stuff we've seen with people weaponizing their social media to then push their views out there and kind of be vitriolic, they do deserve criticism. Now, I don't want you to just find somebody that has their fucking pronouns in their bio and, well, they got pronouns, so they're the ones that ruined dragonage, so I'm going to harass them. That makes you kind of look like a piece of shit. I'm sorry. If they're not out there actively being an asshole to start with, then don't fucking bother them. They're just living their life. And I think that I think that a lot of this is people, once the $70 thing went in and studios started putting out middling products and then just expecting you to not criticize them, and then you open up your phone every day while you're sitting on the shitter and you see article after article after article after article condemning you as the consumer and how the game shouldn't have failed, and it's not the studio's fault. It is the studio's fault. There's one person, or there's a group of people to blame when a game does bad. It is almost 9 times out of 10. I'm saying 9 times out of 10 because there's 1% of the time when it's like EA, it's the publisher, and it's the game. It's usually the publisher is the 1% of the time where it wasn't marketed well. Is that a lot of people didn't know. Usually the marketing is a big problem where it just wasn't marketed well and people don't know about it. And if you don't know about it, you're not gonna buy it. And then on top of that, there's also like where they force weird shit on a game where it isn't the studio's fault, but at the same time it still can be put down on the studio. Like with Arcane Austin, they were told that they had to make a multiplayer game, right? Or a game with co-op capabilities, and then they had kind of creative control after that point. They decided to go with the vampire thing, and the game was creatively bankrupt. It had nothing going for it. So therefore you can look at the creative team behind all that and say, I mean, the gameplay's fine. The stuff you were only forced to make it co-op, but you didn't even create something interesting. So why would I keep you on as a creative lead? And I think that is 100% a criticism. And I think that a lot of the devs nowadays and these bigger development companies for these corporations get this pass where the media will carry their water. And then it kind of goes into, well, who do we blame for this game being bad? Well, we blame the audience. We blame the people who spent the money on it, which is going to make them hate you more.
Can then see a user questioning how Mark knows that person is even doing what he's accusing him of, to which someone else points out that he really doesn't. As it turns out, that comment that Mark left is one that he's been copy-pasting all over the comment section. I find this particularly amusing because he tries—
Wait, see, but this is the same question. I understand why you copied and placed. You bought a $70 game and you can't blame us but we can blame you gamers. I mean, it is a differently worded question, but it's very similar, and I would be annoyed in copy and paste. I don't copy and paste my comments back, but I mean, it is I think studios need to take more accountability. 100%. They need to. I saw this really bad with Immortals of Avion, where they were just like, well, it's the industry's fault, it's this fault. Dude, no, it was your fucking fault because the game sucked. But him copy and pasting, this is a nothing burger.
Has to say to act like a human being in his video, but he comes off like some kind of robot. Like, it comes
valid hypocrisy.
Comes off very fake. And then he's just copy-pasting slop in the comment section. I think this guy should take his own advice. Like, bro, try and act like a human instead of a bot. Oh, look, here's a comment he left that's actually not just a copy-paste. This user says,
you have never once called out your colleagues for their cruelty. Nope. See, this makes you look like a complete fucking asshole, and the whole video looked like a joke. I was gonna go watch the video, but you should call out your colleagues if they're being disgusting. You should. I mean, if you have a critique with them, now I'm not saying put them on blast and fucking drag them through the mud, but I'm saying if you see somebody out there, right, and you work with them, and like I said with the whole Nancy Pelosi being a dirty whore or Trump being a dirty whore, and they said that, and I would go to them, I would first say on social media, I would be like, I would like quotate this and say, this person works for me, but this is not the views of the entire company. There will be a conversation, and they would then post an apology or lose their job, because it is the buyer base. That is, I don't want to lose half my buyer base. I don't care if it's left wing or right wing. I don't want to lose that buyer base. And I think that there needs to be more criticisms being levied against the people you work with. I think the industry needs to stop glazing itself and fucking having people out there like Greg Miller who are just willing to allow anything that is the popular narrative and whatever the mainstream gaming media says, that then hold water for these bad companies. I don't like that. I think that the media needs to be the most critical of these companies instead of being critical of games that are like that are huge successes like Black Myth Wukong, or now I have seen the media kind of turn in the favor of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which is awesome because they condemned the first game for no fucking reason whatsoever. But you see like some of these games that are successful, that deserve their success because they appeal to the entire gaming base. But oh no, we want this game that fucking failed, that nobody liked, to be a 9 out of 10. We want to bolster this one. You guys are assholes for not buying this one, and it just makes me question where your ethics are and if you're getting paid off. Now, I'm not saying that they are getting paid off, but it feels that way. It feels disingenuous whenever a game like Immortals of Avion, Dragon Age the Veilguard, Avowed is doing okay. So like Avowed, I think has enough good combat going for it that people are overlooking how shitty of an RPG it is. But you see that the mainstream is carrying the water for these things when they should be looking internally like, what did we do wrong?
You have never once called out your colleagues for their cruelty. And Mark says, nope. Yeah, it's not a copy paste, but it's still definitely not helping his case. This user says, studios attack the gamers. Gamers retaliate. Studios shocked Pikachu face. And Mark Dara's back with his copy paste nonsense. We can see
that was actually a funny comment, dude. I mean, that was just good. I like when people put the meme in, and usually I will, even if somebody disagrees with me and they put something funny, I will comment back. I had somebody recently say that like one of my videos was none of my points were good, right? And I was like, which points? And they just put a timestamp at the beginning of the video and the end of the video, and I was like, you got me there, dude. That was funny. That was fucking funny, dude. When somebody says something kind of funny, I try to look at all the comments, even if they're angry, as kind of a funny thing. They're all funny. It's all fun. I do this for fun. And it's like this guy's just kind of botting his way through it because he's being big mad soy bitch. I mean, this is just pathetic. Copying and pasting on every single one. The first two examples were terrible because it was basically the same question. But I mean, this is a don't ask questions, just consume product and wait for next product, and being upset about it. I mean, that's kind of the vibe we're getting lately.
See another example of that right here, where this person says, quote unquote, don't ask questions, just consume product and wait for next product. And there's Mark's typical copy paste response. There's plenty more examples of him doing this, but I'm sure you get the point. Interestingly enough, this comment reads, you know what, credit where credit's due. The comment section is not turned off. And Mark says, not yet.
Oh, dude, what a bitch. If he turns the comment section off, anybody who turns their comment section off and is, that shows that you cannot handle criticism. And that makes every single argument that I gave him credit for, not credit, but I gave him a lead. I gave him this long this long brief of space to just roam and play in, where I was being generous. It all becomes disingenuous because you're considering any sort of critique an attack, and critiques are not attacks. You know, if you say, well, I didn't like this game because of this, and they're like, why are you attacking the game? It's like, well, I wasn't. You're just being defensive for no reason.
All this goes back to what I said earlier about how I don't think this guy genuinely does care about the industry. He seems intent on defending certain people from criticism. I think we all know who those certain people probably are. Because even just taking a look at his video and his actions in the comment section, he's only giving gamers even more reasons to despise the AAA industry. Lastly, let's take a look at this exchange where a user says, I guess devs can be cruel for years, and the second it happens back to them, the gamers are the bad guys and the devs are all of a sudden the victim. Right. Mark says, ideally we would see decorum from everyone. But people point out how he doesn't seem to really stand by that at all. The next response saying,
I mean, he did say people, but he did kind of put it back on the audience. And again, expecting all the people to hear, oh, well, humanity and nice, you're fucking talking to the internet. The internet is a mean place. It's always been a mean place. To think that it's not a mean place is kind of way too idealistic. And ideally, in a perfect world, everybody would be nice to each other. But again, that's not how things work.
That was of no priority to you in this video. And indeed, he never mentioned that at all. Instead, he was trying to frame all the critiques from gamers as attacks and unjust complaining, and mentioning nothing of the awful behavior we've seen from numerous devs in the industry. The next response reads, people didn't when it was one-sided for the last decade. Too late to do a 180 and say people should now, when the other side has the upper hand. Western AAA games have been terrible for value for the longest time, and there's no reason to buy them over indie or Eastern developed games. And then this.
So, the indie, or not the indie, the Western developed games thing drives me up a fucking wall. And it's not because I have anything against Asia or well, I mean, Asia obviously encompasses Japan. So China, Japan, all of Asia. I have no problem with that area, right? But I think that there's a huge misunderstanding when people are like, well, they don't put politics in the game. They absolutely do. They absolutely do. It's like when people say that anime is not as political. It's like you don't understand the political structure of another country. I feel the same way when I see somebody from like fucking Switzerland commenting on US politics. It's like, the fuck you know about US politics? You live in Switzerland and you're getting the news like fourth hand, dude. You're getting it from this guy. Oh, now you have the opinion that you should tell Americans how they should live their lives. Go fuck yourself. You don't actually have any understanding of what's going on here because you don't live here. You're not seeing it day to day, and you can comment on it. Sure, I'm not gonna like condemn your freedom of speech, but I'm not gonna take your opinion seriously. It's the same thing when I see people say that, well, Eastern game devs don't want to put their shit in their stuff. And I'm sure that they're putting their own political political ideologies in the games or in the anime that goes against whatever their political system is in Japan or China. Probably not China because they'll just throw them in a fucking like work camp forever. But in Japan, right? And we don't know what it could be pushing against or what's a cultural norm that they're speaking out against in these media or these entertainment properties. So whenever they say the Western AAA thing, it's just like sometimes sure, other times I don't know. But like there is a big boom in the indie scene that we're seeing that's better than ever before. It's the indie scene's stronger than it ever has been, and it's only getting bigger because people are sick of paying $70 for a game when they can get a game like Turbo Overkill for $20, and it's 10 times what we've seen from the AAA industry.
This response says, so where's your video about game dev cruelty, Mark? Where's your article about that? What a snake. It's much more cruel to be an executive producer who pushes for or allows all the elements that were guaranteed to get everyone working under you laid off. Hey, that's kind of similar to what I mentioned earlier, and how it comes off like Mark is very disingenuous. But continuing, the user says, the team's well-being was your responsibility as far as game production goes. Unless you're telling me that EA was pushing all those undesirable elements, and you'd like to tell us that. But you probably weren't even one to rein your more belligerent coworkers in, let alone keep their sales-killing agendas out of the product. You know what, I'll read one more comment right here, this one that says, realistically, we see attacks from devs. You need to get comfortable with the fact that you're not a victim. All in all, I think the people in the response...
I mean, fair. That comes on off assholey. Like, asshole response is gonna get asshole response always. I mean, that's just how it works. It's just how it works, but, I mean, there is this idea that you can't criticize devs and that they should be protected all the time, like they're these super special individuals, when you just work for a big company, dog. And when that big company's product doesn't do well, and it costs like $100 gajillion to make, that company's going to want to fix their balance somehow, and you're going to be on the chopping block. So when you have people like going out there not criticizing, but attacking half of the country, whether it be left or right, that's going to look fucking bad. And that they're not going to want to buy your game because now they're already wary about how they're worried that they're going to meet a character and that character is going to be a cartoony representation of what their beliefs are and be overly evil, and they don't want to deal with that when they're fucking getting off work and they worked hard and now they bought something that that was a part of a series that previously wasn't vitriolic toward them. Now they spent $70, which is more than what it cost in the past, to be fucking lectured about how they're a piece of shit. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that.
Responses did a great job of responding to Mark and pointing out the issues with the pathetic arguments that he attempted to make. Once again, let me know what you think about all of this stuff in the comments here. And if you enjoyed my coverage, please consider liking and or subscribing. Appreciate ya. Have a great weekend ahead, and I'll see you in the next one.
And I mean...
Hi, I'm JT, and I made Result Hunter, the search engine for...
I mean, here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. I 100% like... feel he made the video, and there's a lot of this culture war stuff that is very edged in one direction. It's very edged in one direction, like fight against these fucking corporate scumbags. We're sick of being alienated. I'm on the defensive. And that's a lot how a lot of these videos come across. Absolutely. And I think he does a very good job with at least his video quality and his direction that he's going in. His name is, we have another video, Hero High. But here's the thing, dude. Here's the thing when I look at like the whole guided direction that it goes in. It's very, I feel like it misses out on that middle ground. I think it misses out on that understanding, and it doesn't hold out that olive branch. Like, I understand where you're coming from. I understand what's going on here. But what you need, but it doesn't look at the other side of the coin, right? It doesn't see them from their perspective, which, again, it is fair to say that they gave you a bad product. They criticized you. Why can't you criticize them back? When you see interviews where the game are like they talk to one of the game devs and all they talk about is how evil gamers are, and then that game dev who wasn't even a lead game dev then gets criticized online. Well, that's attacking. Well, that's not attacking, bro. Get your fucking panties pulled out of your little fucking taint wagon and just realize that you criticize somebody's gonna criticize you. And if you're working at a studio and you're the head on a game, you should not want your team to be out there fucking spitting anger against everybody out there, because we've seen a lot of that. And I think that the games media needs to do a better job of holding these studios accountable for their actions. And when there is a game that has a slight, try to put your bias to the wayside and think about it in a more critical sense. Why do you think somebody on this side of the political aisle didn't enjoy it? Well, then ask those questions. Don't you think that by putting some of these lectures in and some of these overly monologue things, I might agree with it, but you do realize that an entire base does not? Do you think that affected your game sales? Asking questions like that, I think, are very important, and we're not seeing from the media. I think it's important when you're a journalist to try to look at every side of the coin, especially when you're going to talk to somebody about it. But that's about all I got on that one today, guys.